On our anniversary, my husband took me to dinner, then served me legal papers his brother drafted. It's just business, he said flatly. I choked back tears while they clinked glasses. When I walked away, I left something behind that would shatter everything they thought they'd. I met Mark in Columbus, Ohio. I was in my last year of college, working at a coffee shop near campus. He was a regular. Tall, always dressed too well for someone grabbing drip coffee. I remember he ordered the same thing every time, black, no sugar. We talked more and more each time he came in. After a few weeks, he asked me out. We clicked fast. It was easy. Too easy. He had a startup idea he was building out of his apartment. I had a business minor and no clue what I wanted to do after graduation. I started helping him out, just little stuff at first. Organizing receipts, updating spreadsheets, answering emails. Before I knew it, I was in deep. He called me his right hand. Said he couldn't have done any of it without me. And I believed him. For 10 years, I helped him build the company. I gave up job offers. I took no paycheck. I worked nights and weekends. I even talked him out of some really bad deals early on. I helped design his pitch decks. I met with investors. I did payroll. I kept the books. We got married 5 years in. Small wedding. His older brother, Wyatt, was his best man. I never liked Wyatt. He was smug. Smarter than everyone in the room, or at least he thought he was. Corporate attorney, slick talker. Mark always said Wyatt was just misunderstood. I tried to believe that, but there was always something cold in his eyes. I should have trusted my gut more. Fast forward to this year, our 10th anniversary. I was still working with Mark full-time, even though the company had grown a lot. 10 employees, actual office space downtown. We were doing well. At least I thought we were. He made a reservation at Lindy's, a place I'd always wanted to go, but we never did because it was too expensive. That night he told me to dress up, said he wanted to do it right this year. I got excited, thought maybe he was trying to reconnect. We've been kind of distant the past few months. Nothing huge. Just little things. He was always on his phone, took more meetings with Wyatt, was quiet at home. I figured it was just stress. I put on my nicest dress, did my hair. I even wore heels, which I hadn't done in a while. When we got there, the hostess greeted him by name. That should have tipped me off. He was calm, too calm. Ordered a bottle of wine. Asked me how my day was. It felt weird, like he was rehearsing something. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. I wanted to give this to you in person, he said. I thought it was something sweet. Maybe a card or a memory book or something cheesy but cute. It was divorce papers. I just stared at them. At first I thought maybe it was a joke. Some weird business prank. I even laughed. He didn't. These are real. I asked. He nodded. It's for the best. That's when Wyatt walked in. He sat down next to Mark like it was all planned. Ordered a drink. Didn't even say hello to me. Just looked at the folder and said, everything's in order. Then they clinked glasses. I sat there frozen, trying not to cry in front of everyone. I was humiliated, betrayed, confused. I asked Mark, why? What did I do? He shrugged. It's not personal. It's just business. Just business. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I couldn't even look at them. I took off my wedding ring and set it on the table. Then I walked out. But here's the part they didn't know. I had already started to suspect something was going on. A few months earlier, I noticed some weird things, bank transfers that didn't match our books, emails I wasn't copied on, meetings I wasn't invited to. And one day, I overheard part of a phone call between Mark and Wyatt. Something about clearing her out clean and not leaving anything on the table. They didn't know I was in the hallway. After that, I started documenting everything. I made copies of emails, downloaded company files, took screenshots. I even placed a recording app on my phone and forgot it in the office during their meetings. What I found made me sick. Mark and Wyatt were transferring company assets into a shell corporation registered under Wyatt's name. They were moving IP, patents, even pending contracts. They were trying to freeze me out before taking the company public. And the prenup? Mark had violated it the moment he used our joint funds to buy commercial property under the shell. They wanted me gone before the money got big. I didn't say anything that night. I left quietly. But I left more than just my ring behind. That folder? I had swapped it. The one Mark gave me? It's still in my home safe. The one I left on the table? It looked the same, but it held copies of everything I'd gathered. Every email. Every file. every shady transaction. It was bait. I knew Wyatt wouldn't be able to resist opening it. And once he did, once he saw I had everything, they'd panic. And panicked men make mistakes. After that night, everything moved fast. I didn't go back home. I went straight to my cousin's place in Worthington. She's a nurse, works night shifts, and has a spare room she barely uses. I just needed somewhere safe, quiet, somewhere Mark wouldn't think to look. I turned my phone off. I wiped my laptop. I didn't want Mark or Wyatt tracking anything I did next. 2 days later, I got a call from Sandra Watts. She was an attorney I'd met once, years ago, at a fundraiser for women in small business. She'd been sued by Wyatt's firm over a zoning deal. I remembered how bitter she was after that. But she was smart, sharp, and she hadn't forgotten what they did to her. I reached out through her assistant and didn't say much. Just told her I needed help with something involving Wyatt and his brother. I didn't even finish the sentence before she said, "I'm in." I met her in a back booth at a small diner near OSU campus. I handed her a flash drive. Her face barely changed as she clicked through everything. Emails, file dumps, bank logs, audio recordings. But her eyes? Cold. Focused. "This isn't a divorce," she said. "This is corporate fraud." I nodded. "They thought I'd just take it and go." She smiled. "They're going to wish you had." Wyatt did open the folder I left behind. I know this because 2 days later, Mark sent me a cold, 2-line email. "Your games won't work. We had every right to restructure the company. No wrongdoing. Let it go." That told me everything. They were scared. Wyatt sent a follow-up from his law firm's address. Said any unauthorized use of confidential business materials could result in legal action. He even threatened criminal charges if I leaked sensitive data. What they didn't know, I'd already sent everything to the Ohio Securities Commission. And I didn't leak it. I reported it. Sandra helped me file a whistleblower report, complete with timeline, documentation, and a sworn affidavit about how I'd discovered the transfers. They also didn't know I'd already emailed a few of their investors. Not threats. Just polite, professional messages asking if they were aware of recent internal restructuring at the company. I included screenshots of property deeds and loan documents with Wyatt's name on them. 2 pulled out by the end of the week. One of them replied to me directly, "Thank you for the information. We'll be reviewing our involvement going forward." I found out later they sent Wyatt and Mark a formal demand for clarity on ownership and leadership structure. It rattled them. Mark showed up at my cousin's place that night, banged on the door like a cop, yelled my name through the hallway. My cousin called the police before I could stop her. He left before they arrived, but not before sliding a note under the door. It said, "You're ruining everything. We had a plan. You were part of it. You just didn't wait." That was the moment I realized the truth. They weren't trying to cut me out because I was useless. They were cutting me out because I knew too much. Sandra filed a civil suit within 2 weeks. It wasn't just divorce anymore. She listed claims for breach of fiduciary duty, fraud, emotional distress, and wrongful asset seizure. But what shook them more? I filed for co-founder status with the state. Mark had never formally listed me, but Sandra found a paper trail going back years, emails, investor decks, business proposals with my name on them, even a tax filing where I was listed as operations lead. That was enough. Once I filed, we requested a temporary restraining order to stop all transactions involving the company or any of its assets. And it got granted. They couldn't move a dollar without court permission. Mark's new CFO quit the next morning. I should have felt satisfied, but I didn't, because I found out something else. There was another woman. Her name was Erin. She worked at the company for a few months the year before. Admin role. I barely noticed her at the time, young, sweet, always polite. I remembered she quit suddenly. I found her on LinkedIn. I sent a message asking if she'd be willing to talk privately about her time working with Mark. She messaged back within the hour. Her reply? "I was fired after I told HR Mark touched me without asking. Wyatt was in the room when I reported it. They said I misread things. I never signed an NDA. I'm ready." Everything twisted in my stomach. They weren't just trying to erase me. They were covering everything. Sandra added a retaliation and workplace misconduct claim to the suit. We subpoenaed company communication records between Mark, Wyatt, and HR from the period when Erin was employed. They delayed. We pushed. The judge ordered compliance. What came back was disgusting. There were emails. Jokes. One from Wyatt that said, "Next time, Make sure there's no cameras if you're going to be stupid. Sandra looked at me and said, he's done. They both are. But it wasn't enough. I wanted everyone to know. So I called a local business reporter who'd once interviewed Mark for a Startup Stars column. I offered an exclusive. No NDA. No conditions. Just one thing. Tell the truth. She published a story titled, Local Tech Company Rocked by Fraud Allegations, Co-Founder Steps Forward with Proof. It included parts of Aaron's interview, anonymous investor quotes, and direct references to Wyatt's legal threats. The day it hit print, the company's website went offline. That same night, Mark texted me. Just one word, why? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't done yet. After the article hit, it was like the whole city turned its head. People who used to greet Mark with handshakes and smiles were now ghosting him. Investors were reevaluating. Board members stopped returning his calls. The startup's name became a punchline on local business forums. And Wyatt? He tried to go into full cleanup mode. He had his firm issue a press release claiming the story was grossly exaggerated, that no formal charges had been filed, and the company was undergoing a routine internal review. But the damage was already done, and I wasn't done either. What they didn't know, what I hadn't told even Sandra yet, was that I still had access to something very, very sensitive. See, when I left, I didn't just copy files. I also had a security token tied to the company's internal dashboard. Wyatt forgot to deactivate my admin login. Maybe they thought I'd never use it again. Maybe they just got sloppy. Either way, I still had full access. Payroll, internal chats, server logs, deleted files. I spent nights scrolling through Slack messages between Mark, Wyatt, and a few of the managers. What I found wasn't just shady, it was illegal. They were falsifying revenue numbers. They were inflating sales reports for pitches. They listed clients who never signed contracts and included those numbers in fundraising decks. One manager questioned it in a private thread. Wyatt replied, "It's all about perceived momentum. Nobody reads the fine print. Keep the buzz going." I screen recorded every message. I downloaded PDF after PDF. Sandra and I met the next morning in her office. I showed her everything. She leaned back, blew out a breath, and said, "This isn't civil anymore. This is criminal." We contacted the state attorney general's office, then the IRS. Within 2 weeks, the AG opened an investigation. Wyatt's firm cut ties with him. He was told to take a leave of absence, but we both knew what that meant. He'd become a liability. Mark, on the other hand, stopped showing up to the office. Rumors swirled online, burner Reddit accounts, anonymous Glassdoor reviews, even a few LinkedIn posts from ex-employees hinting at toxic leadership and ethical issues. But then things got personal. Really personal. I started getting weird texts from unknown numbers. "You made your point. Let it go. You're not as smart as you think. You're playing with fire." I got one that said, "Hope your little cousin sleeps with her doors locked." That one nearly made me throw up. I took screenshots and filed a police report. They traced one of the numbers to a burner phone purchased in Cleveland. Nothing came of it directly, but it gave us something else. A legal reason to request Mark and Wyatt's phone records. And that's when the real twist came. Because one of Wyatt's old college buddies, someone we didn't even know existed, contacted Sandra anonymously. He said he had something we'd want to see. Something Wyatt never wanted getting out. It was a video. From a party. 10 years ago. Long before I met Mark. Wyatt was drunk, laughing, and saying into the camera, "I taught Mark everything he knows, how to lie, cheat, and still come out the hero. He just smiles more than I do." The guy added, "I used to think it was a joke, but now I know it wasn't." He gave us permission to use it. Sandra watched the clip 3 times in silence. Then she said, "We're going to bury them." But in the middle of all this, something hit me. I wasn't happy. I wasn't proud. I was tired. I'd spent 10 years building something with someone I thought loved me. I gave him everything, and he repaid me by turning me into a stepping stone. Something to crush and walk over. But what hurt most? I think he really believed I'd just walk away, that I'd cry, maybe scream, and then disappear. He didn't think I had it in me to fight back. He didn't think I mattered enough. So I made sure every part of what I was doing mattered. I sent a letter to every woman who had worked at the company and left suddenly. Not a lawyer letter. Just a personal one. Simple. Honest. I told them what I knew. What I'd found. And that if anything had happened to them, if they'd been mistreated or silenced, they weren't alone. 3 women responded. One had been paid off to stay quiet. NDA and all. Another had left after finding out Mark was pocketing equity she was promised. The third, she said she had screenshots, messages, proof. I forwarded everything to Sandra. We were building a second lawsuit now. This one was about abuse of power. And we had names, dates, documents. Wyatt's reputation was already on fire. Now Mark's was going with it. At this point, even people who used to call me just the wife were asking for meetings. VCs, former partners, even a board member who once told me to let the men handle the big conversations. Now they wanted to hear my version of events. I gave them all the same answer. You didn't want my voice when I was quiet. You don't get it now that I'm loud. The day I got the letter from the IRS, I didn't open it right away. It sat on my cousin's kitchen table for hours. I knew what it was. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I knew exactly how far Wyatt and Mark's mess had spread. When I finally opened it, I sat down and read every line twice. They were launching a formal investigation, not into me, but into the company's filings over the past 3 years. The part that caught my eye? Tax discrepancies and misreported income tied to multiple shell entities. I couldn't believe they'd been that sloppy. Or maybe they'd just gotten arrogant. The next morning, Sandra called. Her voice was calm, but I could tell she was fired up. They're being audited. This is real now. She was already in contact with the AG's Financial Crimes Division. The whistleblower documents we'd submitted had started a paper trail they couldn't ignore. IRS, SEC, local business licensing boards. Even the FBI's white-collar crimes unit had requested records. That's when I realized they weren't just going to lose their company. They could lose everything. Meanwhile, Mark was unraveling. A former intern at the company posted a thread on Twitter accusing him of being manipulative, dishonest, and abusive behind closed doors. She'd worked directly under him for 6 months. Her story included screenshots of texts and DMs. I didn't recognize the girl, but the way he talked to her? I knew that tone. I'd heard it before. Quiet, controlling, like every sentence was a trap. That thread went viral in the Columbus startup scene. 3 more ex-employees added to it. A few people defended him at first, said he was always professional or he'd never raise his voice. But those people were quiet by the next day, because more screenshots started showing up. And not just from women. 2 former male employees posted emails where Wyatt had threatened to blacklist them if they didn't stay quiet about internal misreporting. One said he was paid under the table to create fake client contracts for investor decks. Another showed a message from Mark that read, "Don't worry about what's real. Just make the numbers look good." It was all unraveling. But here's where it got strange. Wyatt disappeared. Not literally. He didn't vanish off the face of the earth. But he stopped showing up to hearings. Stopped replying to his own legal team. His voicemail was full. His office was locked. One of his old paralegals told Sandra he had flown to Florida 2 weeks earlier and hadn't come back. There was talk he might be trying to skip the fallout. Some said he was trying to liquidate property. Others thought he was negotiating immunity behind the scenes. Sandra didn't care. If he's running, she said, he's guilty. And we're going to catch him. Then I got served. But not by Mark. By a law firm in Chicago. They were representing a silent investor in the company. Someone who had poured in over $500,000 a year earlier. They were suing for fraud, but they wanted to depose me too. Said I had material knowledge of what happened. I thought I'd be scared. Instead, I felt calm. Because I'd spent 10 years being invisible. And now, everyone wanted to hear what I had to say. Sandra helped prep me. The deposition was on Zoom. Cold, formal, hours long. I sat there in a blazer I borrowed from my cousin and told the truth, start to finish. Every time they tried to twist something, like my involvement in the business or my knowledge of the shell companies, I hit back with receipts, names, dates, files. After 4 hours, their tone shifted. They knew I wasn't just some bitter ex-wife. I was the one who built what Mark tried to steal. A week later, I got an email from a junior employee who still worked at the company's now crumbling HQ. She was quiet, shy, had always kept to herself. She wrote, "Thank you for what you did. I saw everything, but I didn't think anyone would believe me. You gave people like me a voice." I cried when I read that. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was something deeper. Something I didn't even know I needed. Proof that I was never crazy. That what I lived through mattered. But then came the biggest twist. Mark filed a motion in court. He was claiming he was the victim. Said I had hacked his private documents, that I had manipulated the media and sabotaged business relationships out of spite. Sandra just laughed when she read it. It's desperation, she said. He's trying to make himself look like the underdog. But the judge didn't buy it. The motion was denied immediately. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark wasn't going down without trying to take me with him. And I was right, because just 3 days later, I found out who had really sent that threat about my cousin. And it wasn't Mark. I thought Mark was the monster. I was wrong. 3 days after the judge denied his motion, I got a call from Sandra late at night. She sounded tense, like she'd been holding something back until she could confirm it. Sit down, she said. She told me that during discovery, a subpoena for Wyatt's communications had come back. Most of the stuff was expected: emails between him and Mark, investor pitch documents, internal memos about splitting assets. But there was one thread Sandra hadn't seen before. It was a string of encrypted messages between Wyatt and someone under the initials TD. At first it seemed like just more damage control talk, legal strategies, corporate jargon. But then Sandra read me this one line from a message sent weeks before the dinner where Mark handed me those divorce papers. She's going to be a problem. If we don't keep her scared, she'll go scorched earth. Tell the cousin to sleep with her doors locked. My stomach dropped. That wasn't a bluff from some burner phone. That was coordinated intimidation. And it wasn't from Mark. It was from TD. I couldn't place the initials at first. I ran through everyone I knew. Old clients, contractors, board members, but nothing clicked. Then Sandra sent me a screenshot of the email address tied to it, t.dawson@northbankfund.com. And I felt sick. Tyler Dawson, Mark's very first investor. The man who cut our first seed check years ago when we were still running the company from our apartment. I remembered Tyler. He was older, maybe mid-50s. Owned a boutique venture fund in Dayton. Very buttoned up. Always polite. A little too friendly. When we first pitched to him, he barely spoke to me. Called me Missy, even though I introduced myself as co-founder. He was always around Mark and Wyatt. Took them to golf outings. Invited them to bourbon tastings. I was never included. And now I knew why. Tyler wasn't just backing the company. He'd been part of the plan to cut me out from the beginning. He even helped Wyatt set up the dummy shell corporations, used one of his portfolio companies to funnel cash into them under the radar. Sandra dug deeper and found records connecting Tyler's fund to 4 fake client contracts the company used to inflate revenue. He wasn't just a financial backer. He was a co-conspirator. That changed everything. We added Tyler Dawson to the lawsuit, along with his firm, Northbank Fund. Sandra contacted the AG's office and handed them everything. Tyler tried to play it cool. Had his lawyers send over a thin denial statement claiming the messages were taken out of context. But it was too late. The threats were documented. The shell companies were tied to his LLCs. His name was all over internal funding memos that he'd previously denied writing. He stopped answering calls. Then the press got hold of it. A journalist from the Columbus Dispatch ran a full expose titled, "Investor Behind Tech Darling Linked to Fraud, Threats, and Cover UPS." Tyler's LinkedIn vanished overnight. His fund's website went offline the next day. And then, he flipped. Sandra got the call first. Tyler's lawyers were offering full cooperation in exchange for reduced liability. He'd turn over everything: emails, bank logs, private memos, even recordings. Yes, he had recordings. Apparently, Tyler kept records of every meeting with Mark and Wyatt, paranoid, like most men who lie for a living. We got the audio files within the week. One of them was from 6 months before the dinner. In it, Wyatt says, "She built half this company. She knows the numbers better than you do. If she ever gets pissed, we're dead." Mark replied, "So we kill her deal, split the rest, and move on. She'll cry and disappear." Tyler's voice cuts in. "Make sure she doesn't have a reason to come after us. If she does, I'll scare her off myself." That was the moment. That was when I stopped feeling like a victim. They hadn't just hurt me. They erased me on purpose. And they planned to scare me silent. Sandra gave the tapes to the AG. Then she filed a new motion to freeze Tyler's personal and business assets. And we filed for punitive damages, high enough to cripple all 3 of them. Mark, Wyatt, Tyler. 3 men who thought I was just some quiet woman in the corner. Now they were hiding from subpoenas, drowning in press coverage, and bleeding cash trying to silence a storm they started. And I wasn't done yet. Because there was one more piece of this they hadn't even thought about. Something I hadn't touched. Something they had forgotten. But I hadn't. I kept something from everyone. Not because I didn't trust Sandra. Not because I didn't think it mattered. But because it was mine. I had spent the last few months exposing fraud, chasing court orders, and burning down the carefully constructed lies of 3 arrogant men. But there was one thing I hadn't used yet, because I wanted to be sure I had every other weapon first. It was an old hard drive. Back when Mark and I first started the business, we didn't use cloud storage. Everything went onto local backups, just in case. Every pitch deck, financial spreadsheet, every scanned contract or client signature. At some point, we upgraded our systems and stopped using the old setup. But I never got rid of it. It was in a box in the back of our bedroom closet. Mark forgot it even existed. I didn't. One night, I plugged it in at my cousin's kitchen table, and I found everything. A full copy of our earliest incorporation documents, ones that had my name listed as co-founder before Mark quietly filed an amended version without me months later. Drafts of emails where I wrote key parts of client pitches that Mark later took credit for. Bank statements showing where my personal account had funded early office expenses, furniture, software, vendor retainers. And one folder that made my hands shake. It was labeled S, Backup. Inside were scanned copies of checks. Client checks. One of them was made out to me, signed by an early client who paid me directly when Mark was out of town on a trip. I remembered that week. We hadn't set up payroll yet, and the client just wanted to get things moving. I deposited it, logged the payment, and Mark made me void the deposit and reissue it to the business account. He said, "It's cleaner this way." But the scan was there. My name. My signature. It was direct evidence that I was actively managing deals and cash flow at the time. That I was doing real work, not just helping on the side. It destroyed his whole legal position. And the timestamp? Dated 5 weeks before Mark claimed I joined in a passive role. I sent it to Sandra. She called me at midnight. "You were the company," she said. "They just erased you." With the hard drive files, we amended the lawsuit again. This time we asked the court not just for damages, not just for injunctions, but to legally recognize me as a 50% founding stakeholder retroactively. If granted, that would mean I owned half of everything they touched with the company from day one, including stock, real estate, patents, and any pending acquisition deals. And there was one. We found out from an anonymous tip that Mark and Wyatt had been in talks to sell the company, quietly, to a larger tech firm in Indianapolis. If the deal went through before our legal fight finished, I'd get nothing. But if I was recognized as co-founder, I'd get half the payout. Sandra filed a block motion to stop the sale. The tech firm's lawyers called us directly the next day, asking for a clarifying meeting. We showed them the evidence. Every single file. They dropped out of the deal before the weekend. Mark lost the last card he had to play. I hadn't seen him in person since that night at Lindy's. He tried calling once. Left a voicemail I never listened to. But I saw him. 2 weeks after the sale collapsed, I went downtown to pick up court documents from Sandra's office. When I came out of the building, I saw him sitting in his car across the street, just staring. He looked thinner, older, exhausted. He didn't even get out of the car, just sat there with his hands on the wheel like he didn't know what to do anymore. He didn't follow me, didn't speak, just watched me walk away, and I didn't flinch. But here's what nobody knows yet. There's a second whistleblower complaint in motion. Not from me. From someone inside Wyatt's old firm. Someone who had access to sealed files. They sent Sandra something through a private channel. I wasn't supposed to see it yet, but she let me read one page. It wasn't just our company they manipulated. It was 6 others. 6 different startups, all in some stage of funding or pre-IPO, and all tied back to Wyatt, Tyler, or their shell companies. We were just the one they got too greedy with. Now the FBI's fraud division is building a case. This won't just end in courtrooms. This could end in prison. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt ready. It took another 4 months before everything came to a head. By that point, the court system, the media, and multiple government agencies were all closing in. The quiet phone calls had turned into formal investigations. The rumors had turned into depositions. And the shell companies? They were now being used as exhibits in federal court. Sandra had warned me, these things move slow. But when it hits, it all hits at once. And it did. On a Monday morning in April, the FBI raided the old office building where Mark's startup used to be. The same building I helped pick out. The same one I furnished. They went in with boxes, hard drives, and warrant teams. They left with everything. Mark was arrested later that afternoon at a rented apartment in Dublin. He looked like he hadn't shaved in a week. They said he didn't say a word the whole time. Wyatt was picked up in Miami, staying at a beach house rented under one of his fake LLCs. He tried to say it was a misunderstanding. It wasn't. Tyler Dawson turned himself in. His deal only bought him limited protection. He still lost everything. His fund was dissolved, his licenses revoked, his name permanently linked to felony-level corporate fraud. And I stood in court the day the ruling came down. The judge read each count: fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to defraud a stakeholder. And then he said the words I'd waited a year to hear. This court recognizes the plaintiff as a 50% founding owner of the company in question, entitled to retroactive equity and full financial restitution. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed steady. I watched Mark lower his head, his lawyer whispering something in his ear. They tried to ruin me. Now I owned half of the ashes they left behind. The final settlement was huge. Between damages, retroactive equity, and stock options, the payout was over $12 million. The court-appointed auditor sold off the remaining company assets and split them according to the judgment. I got more than my share. I took that money and rebuilt everything. Not the company, not the past, but myself. I launched a new firm, this time under my full name. I didn't hide behind my ex-husband's connections. I didn't smile and nod while men explained things to me I already knew. I hired Erin, the girl Mark harassed, and gave her a lead role. I hired the intern who posted that Twitter thread. I brought in 2 of the women who had been pushed out silently over the years. One of them cried when I handed her a keycard. We called it Ashlight Group, because when they burn everything down, all that's left is what can survive fire. Mark took a plea deal. He got 5 years in federal prison. Fraud. Obstruction. Securities manipulation. He'll be out in 3, maybe, if he behaves. But he won't be rebuilding anything. His name's ruined in the tech world. The Columbus business community blacklisted him before he even got sentenced. Wyatt lost his law license permanently. He tried to go on a podcast anonymously to tell his side, but people recognized his voice. He was dragged online so badly he deleted all his social media and moved out of state. Tyler was barred from ever managing investments again. He filed for bankruptcy 6 weeks later. Last I heard, he was living in Indiana under a different LLC, trying to sell consulting advice to people too young to know what he did. I got one final email from Mark. It came after the sentencing. Just a subject line. I was wrong. No message. No apology. No ownership. Just those 3 words, like he thought that was enough. I didn't reply. I just archived it. And then I blocked the address. Sometimes I still think about that night at Lindy's. The look in his eyes when he handed me those papers. The way they clinked their glasses while I tried not to cry. They thought they were ending something. But they didn't end me. They started me. Because when I walked out of that restaurant, I left behind my ring. My silence. My fear. And I took back everything else. Every lie. Every secret. Every stolen dollar. And I made them pay for all of it. With interest.